I want to show you a chart. There was a book in the early 1990s said Why Johnny Can't Read Anymore, something like that. Actually, I know the exact title. It's Why Johnny Can't Read. In the book, he points out what it was like. These were the top 7 problems in schools in 1943. Chewing gum, making noise, running the halls, cutting the line, talking in class, dress code infractions, and littering. Yeah, 1943, those were the big issues that teachers and principals were dealing with. And then he pointed out in 1993, here were the top 7 issues: suicide, assault, robbery, rape, guns and knives, drug abuse, and alcoholism. Quite a different list, right? Quite a different list. So, obviously, the big question is why, right? Why, in just 50 years, has there been such a fundamental shift in children's behavior and kids' behavior? What are all the factors behind that? And the reality is, of course, the big question is, what can we possibly do about that? I mean, it feels like an enormous subject when you look at something like this. And so I'm going to give you something so challenging to talk about today that I've really been over this again and again, trying to know. It's challenging to know what parts of this to talk to you about, because I don't want this to overwhelm you with just statistics, so I'm going to be real careful about that. But we're in this series called Reset, and this is what I've said is, wouldn't it be great if there's some things in life we could hit the reset button on? And one of the things I would love the reset button on is resisting toxic influences in our lives, and they are everywhere. And so I wanted to show you this. I want to ask you to open up your program, grab your notes. If you're watching online, this is going to be a super challenging content-wise message, so you may want to get your notes. If you've never been to our website at penulchurchlife.com, the notes are there. So I'm going to ask you to write some things down today, and realistically, all I want you to do is walk out of here going, I wonder, okay? That's what I'm after. I just want you to think, what if these influences are present in our life and they're affecting us? That's all I want you to think about. Because a lot of this is going to be new stuff that most people, many Americans, have never heard before. So let's jump into it. First thing I want you to do, I want you to be aware that we are being influenced. That's the first thing. I just want you to be aware and acknowledge that that we are being influenced as a society, as if that slide didn't show it, right? Something is influencing us, and it's taking us in a direction we don't want to go. And sometimes the influences are just kind of, they're innocent. They're no big deal, like this. Do you recognize this? They are called the Wayfarer Ray-Ban sunglasses. In 1983, they were so unpopular that they were about to be discontinued. But a movie came out in 1983. Risky Business with Tom Cruise. And they went from selling 18,000 to 360,000 because of the one movie. Just the one movie, just instantly spiked. And again, okay, so what? So they sold more sunglasses, right? That influence doesn't really matter. It's not the only area where you can see our society being influenced by what we see. For instance, in 2012, there was an explosion of interest in archery. Explosion of interest. Now, the interesting thing is, I was reading, I got a lot of stats. There was a man named Joe Drotter. He ran an archery range in California, and he said, it's been unbelievable. The ranges are packed. The sport has ballooned in interest. Archery stores are swamped and running out of equipment. Does anyone know what happened in 2012? What movie was released in 2012? Anyone know? Hunger Games. Yeah, somebody was whistling. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what happened. Now, do you think that they launched this movie to create kind of a revitalization of archery in America? Of course not. But the archery store owners and the range owners were thrilled with the outcome, because there was just such an explosion of interest. So again, you're talking about 2 examples of us being influenced in our behaviors and our interests and what we value that are pretty innocent, right? So you shot some more arrows at a tree, and then you put your bow in the garage and haven't used it in years, right? Or you have these sunglasses that you wore for a while, and then you broke them or lost them, and it didn't really change society. But it is an illustration of how we are constantly being influenced. And here's the problem. I know what I'm up against today. The world that we live in says, watch whatever you want, look at whatever you want, listen to whatever you want, and it's actually no big deal. That's the world that we live in. It says, and if people could hear what I'm talking about today, This one will never gain traction because it is so counter to everything in our culture that believes this. Because the Bible comes along and God says something very different to that message. He says, I want you to be discerning. I want you to learn how to set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. So, and there's that phrase, here's the command in the Bible, set your mind. So you need to set it on something. And he said, you can choose to set it on all of these influences in our world, but that will have consequences for you. And he said, I want you to learn how to set your mind on things above. So what are the influences that are so impactful in our society today? And again, this is where it's just like, oh, really, Brian, you're going to talk about this? Yes, I am. So here we go. The influence of music. The influence of music. I'm only going to touch on this. Part of the frustration is I could spend probably an hour and a half just talking about the stats. I like stats. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to the data, but I just don't have time. Johns Hopkins University published a report in which they showed that certain types of music can physically and emotionally impact you. They know that they can lower your anxiety. They can help you with pain. They can lower your blood pressure. Do you know that music has been shown certain types to impact your blood pressure? Do you know that? Improve your memory, sleep quality, mood. So we know this. Johns Hopkins, again, isn't a Christian organization putting out stuff about music because they want to reinforce their worldview. They're just publishing resources, information saying, so here's what you need to take away, right? Music, we tend to think of as neutral, but it can have a tremendously positive impact in our life. Now, how many of you think that music can only have a positive impact on your life, that it can't have a negative impact on your life? Well, that would be kind of silly, right? It can only make things better or neutral. It can't go negative. Well, the reality is, of course, there are tons of studies about this. One 2003 study, music can incite aggressive thoughts and feelings. In 2005, there was a study done on the top songs for teenagers. 77% of all lyrics in rap music mention drugs and alcohol. And if you haven't been paying attention, we are becoming a nation of alcoholics. The information about alcoholism in America is just terrifying. It is rampant and climbing at such a rapid rate. But I'm sure it has nothing to do with influences. It's interesting. Now I know I probably just sound crazy talking about this, but I'm going to talk about it. So, one of the things I like to do in order to compensate for the vast amounts of chocolate that I eat every week is run. Thankfully, I like running. So it allows me to eat, and then I can run, and it's like the perfect combination. But my favorite thing to run to is really good music. When I have a good song on, it makes me want to run. The problem is I burn out on songs really, really fast. So a song that I have in my running list today, I probably won't have in there 3 weeks. So that means I have to constantly be feeding that list. So what I'll do when I'm working is I'll just put on, once in a while, I'll put on the top 50 list of songs in Spotify. So these are just the top songs being listened to in America today. Because I'm always listening for another song that I can throw on my running list. Because boy, you get that right song, it's like, ooh, I want to run. And I can't even describe, I cannot repeat the lyrics to half the songs. They are so sexually graphic, so violent. I'm stunned by all the profanity. I am stunned by all the violence towards women, and I'm not talking about outliers. I'm simply talking about the top 50. I'm stunned. I can't tell you how many times I got to go skip, and again. What am I saying? Ban music? No, of course not. Not at all. That won't do any good. All I'm asking is, what if it's influencing us? That's all I'm asking. What if it's influencing? What if the music you listen to is influencing your spiritual life? Your opportunity to connect with God or not? Well, let's go on to the internet and social media. Because this is obviously a big influence in our world today, right? The internet and social media. 2018 Pew Research Center survey discovered that 45% of teens now are online almost constantly. Almost constantly. They never put their phone down. You can see over and over again studies revealing and surveys revealing that so many, it's not uncommon now for teenagers to be on their phone 9 hours a day and in front of screens 9 hours a day without counting work or school stuff. it's just constant. So YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, on and on with all of the different platforms that they're using. So what impact is that having on us? Well, 2019 study showed that using social media more than 3 times a day predicted poor mental health in teens. And I laughed when I read it. 3 times a day, they hit that before breakfast, right? 3 times a day, that's an incredibly low number. So how is this impacting teenagers? One of the biggest things that medical experts are waving red flags about is the impact of sleep. The impact of sleep. What happens when you use your phone at night before you sleep? With the blue screen, what it does, keeps you from going into deep sleep, prevents REM sleep. So that's where your brain has systems to actually clean out the garbage that you absorb during the day. And when you don't get deep sleep or the right kind of sleep, those impurities aren't cleaned out. On top of that, that's also where long-term memory is formed. So your brain transfers things into long-term memory. And when you don't get the right kind of sleep, that is so destructive. All of you know this. If every parent who's ever raised a child understands what happens if your toddler doesn't get the right amount of sleep at night. Are they better? Right? And so this is like chronic now. And the issues that are being discussed for teens is anxiety, depression, and negative body image, on and on and on. We're discovering how much phone use is directly linked, screen use is directly linked to issues like this. It's, everyone know what FOMO is? Fear of missing out. It's a huge issue. So I don't even have time to talk about that one. Unrealistic views of life, huge issue. And constant peer pressure. And which, of course, goes back to the 3 that are underlined. And so there's so much being written about this right now. It is at epidemic levels as our children's and our teens' mental health is falling apart. I used to have the stat. I went hunting for it this morning. I couldn't find it quick. But the likelihood of, you compare like our grandparents' anxiety and depression levels to today's children, and it's just astronomically different. The influences are all taking us the wrong way. And I know I sound like an old fuddy-duddy talking about this, but I'm not done. I just want you to see the science behind it. Let's talk about the issue of pornography. So, pornography in America. Did you know that there are 28,258 users per second using porn in America? Did you know that 35% of all internet downloads are pornography? And did you know that there's a new porn video created every 39 minutes in America? And it is just a staggering business. And the outcome, because again, we know, people can study this, there's so much being written about porn's impact on the brain. It activates the brain in similar ways to street drugs do. If you want an interesting thing, go watch Porn on the Brain. It's a documentary. Habitual users' brain scans are similar to the brain scans found in alcoholics. So it's just science. I'm not judging it. I'm just telling you the science. We know what it does to the human brain. It dulls the reward system. It's linked to less motivation. On and on I could go. It was interesting. When I first started looking into the impacts of it, there were all these different studies. This was years ago. There were support groups where you could go online and join a support group to break the porn addiction in your life. And what was interesting to me is how many of them weren't started by Christians. They were just started by people, specifically men, who wanted to break the addiction of pornography in their life because they could no longer have sex with a real woman. Now, there's a little surprise that the porn industry doesn't tell you. And so these men had gone down a path that had become an addiction and ruined their ability to be with a woman. And then they didn't want that anymore. It's just an amazing problem. And that's just the tip of the iceberg about what we could talk about with this. And the problem is, of course, because, have you ever heard the phrase, this is so true, what we tolerate, our children will embrace. What we tolerate, our children will embrace. It used to be that this would have been something like when I was a child, the only way to get porn was to walk into a gas station and walk up to the magazine rack, and many times it was behind the cashier, and say, could I have some porn, please? Just any of those porns in the plastic wrap. And that's how you had to get it. Or you go to your buddy's house and, find his dad's stash. And that was it. Other than that, it just wasn't around, and you never got to see it. And now it's instantly available all the time, accessible to every single person, regardless of age. And the stats about how much younger and younger children are being exposed to it and how hardcore it is and what it's doing is just terrifying. And again, it's influencing. So again, how about the influence of TV, movies, and video games? If I didn't sound like a crazy old man before, how about now? Okay, I do not want you to feel bad if you've seen this next show. Okay? Chances are some of you have. So don't feel bad about it. But this was one of the most popular cable shows. Game of Thrones. Didn't watch it. But I was on a Christian online magazine where they talked about it, and what I read in that magazine was that there are more prostitutes hired for that show than any other show on TV. So that allows them to do a whole lot more nudity, a whole lot more graphic violence and sex. And what I was stunned to read one day was a story about one of the episodes, and if you've seen this show, that was talked about constantly, where they actually showed a woman being raped. And I thought, when did rape become entertainment? Do you think our grandparents would have watched TV shows where they were watching people get raped on TV and thinking that this was entertainment? What we tolerate, our children embrace, it just continues to go down this way, and I'm just like stunned. And again, I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. I have lots of friends that watch the show. And I'm not asking you to boycott it. But I am asking you to consider, what if it's desensitizing us? Matter of fact, we know it is. We've known since 1981. Studies have shown that exposure to film violence against women portrayed as positive and justified increased men's attitudinal acceptance of violence against women. We've known it since then. And look at our society. Is there any evidence that we're being influenced by all of these toxic influences related to how to treat a woman? Because so much of pornography is violence towards women. So much of what we see on TV is violence against women. Well, 1 in 4 women now in America will experience domestic violence, and every 9 seconds, a woman in America is beaten or assaulted. Everyone okay with those stats? This is the country we want to live in, but we're not being influenced. What if we are? What if it is influencing us? You know what I thought of for the first time in my entire life when I was prepping this? I've only talked about this one time because it's such a difficult, heavy subject. You know, I was born in 1970. So I grew up, went to school in the 70s and the early 80s, and we had so few of these influences I've talked about, right? We didn't have the internet. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have the kind of music that they have access today, and if you wanted it, it was hard to get. We didn't have the TV shows. You know, I watched Mork and Mindy and Star Trek and, you know, Disney on Sunday night. I mean, that's what we watched. We didn't have, you know, Mutual of Wild Kingdom. We didn't have these kind of options. And none of my friends had cable. So we just didn't have the access to all of this stuff. You know what else we didn't have in the 70s? School shootings. I never remember a school shooting when I was growing up. You know what else we didn't do? Drills in case a school shooter came in. We never did that. And my parents never did that. But we're not being influenced? What if we are? What if we are? That's all I'm asking you to consider. And then, obviously, the influence of who we let into our inner circle. Our friends really influence us. I read a really, really sad story about a girl named Amber who's 21 years old. She said, when I was in school, I went to church, I obeyed my parents, I got good grades. She said, I was every parent's dream until I met Chad. Chad talked me into having sex when we were still in high school. He talked me into a lot of things. I started experimenting with drugs because of Chad. I started drinking till I puked because of Chad. And I was getting into arguments and fights with my parents. I know Chad is a bad influence in my life, but I just don't think I can kick someone out of my life that I love. Wow. for so long the Bible said, you know what, I just want you to know, evil company will corrupt good habits. It will influence us. So I know some of you are just like, are you kidding me? We really came to church to hear this? Like, my goodness, let's this is just a crazy Christian. He's trying to get everything banned and everything dropped, and I'm not. I don't want you to sell your TVs and throw your smartphones in the lake on the way home. I'm not saying any of that, but I do want you to consider what if God is right about this? And you don't have to take my worldview for it. This is on the back of your notes, so you don't have to write it down, but if you flip over your notes, on the back, at the top, it says, here's your assignment. Go to brainacademy.com and watch this one video, The Impact of Screen Time on Your Kids' Brains. How bad can it be? He's a neuroscientist. He's a brain scientist. He studies the brain for a living. He has a different worldview than I do. He's a scientist with a secular atheist evolutionary perspective. So we come at this from completely different perspectives, right? So if you just think this is just crazy Christians talking about this, fine, investigate it. It'll take you 14 minutes to watch that. And he's funny. He's really, really good. You will not be bored. And make your own decision. And look at what's going on in this world from a scientist's perspective. Because what if it's not just what we think it is? Because look at the outcome of the way that we're being influenced in our world today. Sexual violence on the rise, school shootings, rising suicide rates. We haven't even talked about that. Violence towards women becoming common and accepted, staggering mental health issues with anxiety and depression, and on. I could go with a slide to fill that one. Maybe we are being influenced, which means, number two, maybe it's time to start evaluating and controlling the influences that we let in. I'm not talking about picketing, and I'm not talking about boycotting, and I'm not talking about any of those things. I'm just talking about me. What do we need to do with the influences that we have in our life? Maybe it's time to just have a conversation about this. Here's what the Bible says. I want you to learn to test everything and then avoid every kind of evil. That's what I want you to do. So, a couple of things about this. First, I want you to understand clearly what God wants for you, because he wants something better than all of this. God wants something better for you than all of this. Look at these verses. 2 Timothy 1:9, God has saved us and called us to a holy life. And we, at the start of the service, I know you're watching online, you didn't get to see this, but we talked about what holiness means. It has this idea of being apart from. So if my life looks and sounds exactly like everyone else's life, then there's something missing. Because holiness is the idea of being set apart from. We shouldn't look and sound exactly like everyone around us, because we're called to a holy life. He said God didn't call us to be impure, but to live a holy life. He says he's called us to be his holy people. And then he makes this promise to anyone who will begin to start pursuing holiness in their life. He said those who cleanse themselves from the latter will be instruments for special purposes. That's God's purposes. You will be made holy and then useful to the master, God, and prepared to do any good work. In other words, you will begin to experience more of God's activity in your life. And what if the reason why, when I ask Christians, hey, tell me the last time you experienced the overwhelming love of God, or the last time you felt like God was really working in your life, I get blank stares so commonly from so many Christians. What if it's because of this topic? We've so immersed ourselves in all of these negative influences that we've given him no say. But like that verse says, if we'll just reduce this, it doesn't mean perfection, but it does mean reduction, then we get all these positive things. So one of the things to start doing is start asking the right questions. There are questions that we can ask and should be asking as followers of Jesus when it comes to this subject of our influences. Question number one is it beneficial to me? Especially beneficial, not just to my physical health, my mental health, my emotional health, but to my spiritual health. Will this help me love God more? That's a big question. And the Apostle Paul talked about this in the book of 1 Corinthians when he said this, and this is a great verse. He said, everything's permissible for me, but not everything is beneficial. So it's not wrong to have a cell phone. It's not wrong to have a TV. It's not wrong to listen to music. It's not wrong to listen to secular music. It's not wrong. He was just like, but I want to filter it through this issue of what's beneficial for me. Is it going to benefit me to have this in my life? Will this make me a better person or neighbor or friend? So, is it beneficial? The second question is it pleasing to God? Is it pleasing to God? Because a holy God isn't always pleased by everything. Paul wrote this, he said, whatever is true, look at the yellow words, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, lovely, admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, look at the last four words. What are we supposed to do with those things? Think about such things. The truth is, some of the things in our society are not praiseworthy, and they're not admirable, and they're not pure, and they're not noble. So when we think about those things, they influence us. And he's like, turn the volume down on that. Be careful about the influences that you're letting in. You want to make sure that the things that you're thinking about, that you're letting into your mind, are fitting a description like this. The third thing is set up levels of protection. Because our society is being influenced, and because all of us have access to these influencers, then we need to be careful about it. We're not going back, unless you want to become Amish, we're not going back to no cell phones. And we're not going back to no internet. And we're not going back to no TV. And we're not going back to no music. We're not. So then just be careful. We have to be careful then. And we have to protect ourselves, because some things we shouldn't be allowing to influence. That's the idea of this verse. Blessed is the man or the woman who doesn't walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers. It's like you have a little bit of protection from things in your life that are influencing in a negative way. It's like I'm going to have a little bit of protection here. So for me, this means a couple of things. First, in some areas of my life, with those influence, it is complete avoidance. I'm just not going to have that as a part of my life. There are movies I won't watch, and TV shows I won't watch, and music, when it comes on and it's that graphic, I'll just flip to the next song. I'm not going to listen to that. But the big thing is in that area of internet. If you take my laptop right now after the service, and there's no internet here, but if you could get online, and you try and type in anything inappropriate, this is what you'll be greeted with. So this is the software that I have on my computer. It's called Mobisip, as you can see at the top. And Mobisip is a fantastic blocking software. So I pay a fee every year to have Mobisip on my computers so that I don't have to see it. Because the reality is, no matter what you look for, no matter where you go, Pinterest, Facebook, Reddit, anywhere you go, there's porn. Anywhere. And they're constantly trying to put porn in front of you. Matter of fact, they know that if they can get porn in front of young children earlier, the chances are they'll get hooked. The likelihood that they're going to get hooked. So they're constantly doing it. And so I pay this service, about $60 a year for me to have this, and then you can control the settings, and I don't have the password. Only my wife and my accountability partner have that password. So many times it'll block things that are totally innocent. And that's okay with me. Because then I just hit that request access button, and my accountability partner unlocks it for me, and that's how it works in my life. That way, it can't be accessed. So, purity. Because what did he say? I want you to think about things that are pure. So, important. It's important to me. My purity is important to me. The other thing is, sometimes it's just limited access. So, like your cell phone. 9 hours a day, not counting school, is just a crazy amount of time. So limiting the access that we have on some of these things that aren't bad in and of themselves. It used to be different, right? I know I sound so old. I am becoming my goodness. It's like when we were young, when I was a child, we watched cartoons on Saturday morning, and then they turned off and you didn't watch them again. And your parents immediately came in when cartoons were over and said, go outside and play. And that's what we did. And we went outside. And we lived in a world where we had a little bit of TV time, and then we were outside. We didn't have much screen time because there was nothing. And we're not going back to that. We're not going back to that. And so it's not that TV is wrong. We just want to limit it. It's not that your phone is wrong. We just want to limit it. The problem is most people have no idea how much of an issue this actually is. So let me give you another thing you can do. Here's an app. It's a free app. You go to the Play Store and download Quality Time, and it'll tell you how much time you spend every single day on all of the main time suckers that exist on our phones. So you don't have to use this one. You can use any one you want. But just first thing is become aware. That's the first thing, is just become aware. Because some of you think, I'm doing great with this. I don't use my phone at all. And you're not aware. So just become aware. Just see if it's an issue for you. And then it'll tell you. And it'll tell you exactly how, and there's so many. You can just look for apps that will limit social media time or things like that, and you'll get lots and lots of them. So just find out if it's an issue for you. Is it something that you need to limit? And my favorite thing of all is, it's not about just turning down the volume on this, it's about replacing them with better things. That's what it's really about. Adding positive influences in all of those areas that we just talked about. I love this verse. 1 Thessalonians says, test everything and hold on to the good. That's what we're trying to do. We're not just getting rid of the bad, we're adding good into our lives. Good. So, is it true that there are musical influences in this world that are positive? Almost every country western song is probably just about fine. So I don't know if you listen to country at all, but it's like most of the time it's about their tractor, their dog, or their, I mean, not all of them, right? You got to be a little discerning, but there's tons of music out there that's totally fine to listen to. Tons and tons. And I don't care what style you like, there's a Christian doing it in a really cool version of that. So if you go to Spotify and look up Christian rock or Christian alternative, and you can just find a musical style that's going to bring a positive influence. And I have a Christian playlist on my Spotify for music that really connects my soul deeply to God. Now, probably if I played that list for you, you'd all be like, what? Don't get it. That's okay. Isn't that how music works? We'll have things that we like that are different. So make your own playlist. Figure out a way to bring a positive influence in through music. And find a way. My goodness, I'd be lost if I didn't have internet for message prep, for my job during the week. There's so much positive with the internet. So I'm not one of these crazy Christians running around saying we need to, cancel the internet. Nope, not saying that at all. Just be careful. Not everything on the internet is going to influence you in a positive way. Positive TV, movies, and games. And yes, there are video games that do not, I didn't even have time to talk about video games and the impact on our society with violent video games. Oh my goodness. And every year, I remember when I started out, I was a gamer when I was a kid, and we used to play games that were, just little pixels that you moved around on a map, and that's all you had. And now it's all about how real can they make the game. How much blood, how much violence, how much can they kill. But again, we don't talk about it. We put a little warning on the outside of the package, M for mature, so that they can ignore it when they buy it. But that's the reality. Like I said, part of what's frustrating is trying to touch on some of these things, but there are positive TV shows and movies and games and things like that that have a positive impact on our life, and then obviously friendships. Because here's the issue, right? Here's our society. Rising sexual violence, rising violence in our schools, rising suicide rates, rising violence towards women. Just staggering mental health issues with anxiety and depression. The influences that we're allowing in are impacting us. And they may not be impacting you like this, but how about if I would put up here about a close friendship with God? Because many of you want that. You really want to be closer to God. Is that what you have? What if that's the way that some of these influences are impacting you? What if it's costing you the opportunity to hear more of God's voice in your life? More of the opportunity to really be deeply connected to Him in a friendship? Because here's what He's offering you. Overwhelming peace, indescribable joy, contentment and love and deep friendship with Him and meaning and purpose in this world. What if by just getting this a little bit quieter and making way for a little bit more of the positive influences, we get that right list in our personal lives? Okay, so I have no idea how this sounded today. No idea. There's so much I had to cut for time's sake, but I want to be really clear what I'm not saying. So nobody walk out and say, Brian says if I listen to that kind of music, I'm going to start killing people. I'm not saying that, okay? I'm not going to say your IQ is going to drop so much that you become a Chicago Bear fan. I'm not saying that you're going to become a violent person and start beating women. Okay? I'm not going to say you're going to develop mental disorders. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm just saying that they're influencing us in some way, and that's what we're seeing in our society. That's all I'm saying. We're being influenced. And what if the greatest, this sounds crazy, what if the greatest loss in our life is really the loss of any connection with God? What if that's the biggest loss? Because he is a holy God. And over again he says, I want you to be holy. I want you to be holy. I want you to be holy. What if that's the biggest thing? For those of you who are followers of Jesus, don't become legalistic about this. You do not earn points with God by what you watch and don't watch, okay? That's not how this works. You're not earning God's love. And we never look down on someone because of what they watch or listen to or view or play on their Xbox. Ever. If you think that you're somehow better than because you don't play that game or you don't watch that movie, you didn't see that series, you are not better than. So none of that is allowable in following Jesus. Every single one of us is daily in need of the grace of God, and that will always be true. This should just be personal, you and God. You could say to God, is there anything in my life that I've kind of allowed in, that I've been tolerating, that maybe you don't want, and just listen for that. Make this personal, not about others. If you're just exploring God, maybe watching online, this is the message you chose to watch, the holiness of God is critical. Everything is about the holiness of God. Because we just naively think, when we look around in a society as screwed up as this, we think, well, I'm better than most of these people, right? I've never watched Game of Thrones, so I'm way up here, right? That's craziness, how we always are comparing ourselves and our spirituality and our goodness. And we think that we're better. And we think that if God's grading on a curve, we'll be just fine because we're right in that middle or maybe on the positive side of the curve and we'll be just fine. And God is perfectly holy, which means he is apart from all evil. He's never been entertained by it. He's never participated in it. He is a being of pure love and never participated in anything unloving. And yet we have thousands, hundreds of thousands of times in our lives been, in God's eyes, unholy. And so you can't bring us into his presence any more than you could bring me into the presence of the sun today, right? I would be disintegrated. No shot. And so what is incredible about Christianity is Jesus came to bridge the gap between a holy and perfect Father in heaven and all of us. And then, incredibly, the Bible says that when Jesus died on the cross, he took all of our impurity on him, paid for it in full, and now any human being that wants it can just ask Jesus for forgiveness, and you are, in the words of the Bible, made holy forever. Your soul is made holy forever. Those are his words in Hebrews, made perfect forever. This is the offer of God available through Jesus. You don't have to clean your life up. He'll take care of this for you. Let me have you bow your heads. If you want that gift, then all you have to do is ask for it. It is a complete gift from God. You don't earn it. You don't deserve it. I don't. No human does. Maybe for the first time you've realized that if God were to evaluate your life based on a holy standard, perfection, that you would fall way, way short of that. And maybe that's not the life that you want. Well, Jesus Christ came and gave his life for all of us so that we could be forgiven. If you want what he's offering you with your head bowed, your eyes closed, say something like this to him. Say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. I'm not holy. There's been a lot I've allowed in that would not have pleased you. So I'm asking you today to please forgive me. I want your gift of forgiveness and holiness in my life. Give me a new relationship with you today. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so if you wouldn't mind, at the end of the service every week, we ask you to take your connection card out, and maybe you just prayed and asked for his gift of forgiveness or renewed your commitment. We'd love to know about it. If this topic raised questions for you, there's a place where you can write your comments down. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about a subject like this. And then also, I really want to challenge you sometime today or this week to watch that video on the back. Make up your own mind. It'll take you a short amount of time. It's just another data piece to help us understand just what's really at stake. All right, thanks so much for coming. Hope to see you again next week.